Welcome back. It's still bound 60 minutes, and my name is Ahizoji. If you missed the first part, with us today is Kingsley Moghalu. He's presidential candidate of the YPP. He's sharing with us his vision for Nigeria if elected president. Some people have described you as a true professional, a diligent person, a hard worker. But some see you as an elitist. How do you react to that? Bearing in your mind, yeah. Your dad was a career diplomat.
Yes.
You worked on the same path, in the same shoes. You are a career diplomat.
Was.
You've served across board in several different countries across the world. You've gone to, you were privileged to go to school in Nigeria and abroad. So, are you elitist?
No.
Can women on the streets, people in the markets, farmers on their farms, headsmen moving their cattle across the Nigeria, can they connect with you?
It's very interesting you asked me this question, because over the past 3-4 days, I've done nothing but connecting with market women, farmers, you name it. I mean, I am the candidate in this election who has gone down the most to the grassroots. Since February, when I announced that I was going to contest for the presidency, for the office of the president, I have visited about 30 states in this country, in town halls, visiting markets, interacting with ordinary Nigerians. The other day, I was in Port Harcourt, and we went to Ikoku market. And then we went to, I think it was Mile 1 market, or some other market. We went to one market that was just a market for women. And there I was talking to women in the market about the issues of their daily lives. They were asking me questions and I was answering. What I'm going to do for the education of their children. What I'm going to do about healthcare. So, I mean, I am far from an elitist candidate, but I understand the problems of different levels of society. I understand the problems of the poor. I did not come from a wealthy home because my father was a civil servant, but I did not come from a poor home. I cannot reinvent myself, but I feel for the poor, and that's why I'm running for president. And I can relate with their lives, because it doesn't matter what your background is. What matters is who you are and how you think. The poor, the 87 million people in this country who are living in extreme poverty, they are the #1 focus of the Kingsley Moghalu presidency. How to bring them out of poverty into the middle class is my strategic plan. And I have that strategic plan laid out in a book that's called Build, Innovate, and Grow. Big, my vision for our country.
So how big is your dream for Nigeria?
It's huge. It's big. Here. Build, innovate, build, innovate, and grow. Big. So it's a really big dream. This book is a book of 25 visions, as I call it. In the first vision, we discuss leadership is everything. We then discuss governance strategy, how to govern with strategy. We discuss institutions and why they matter. I discuss nation building, the role of women. I discuss nation building, the whole question of constitutional restructuring. I discuss national security. Then in part 3 of the book, I discuss the economy, different aspects, fiscal policy, monetary policy, industrialization, economic transformation, economic philosophy, how to manage the economy. Then in the final part of this book, we discuss foreign policy. So my vision for Nigeria is a big and comprehensive vision. I have a transformative vision for Nigeria. I want to be the kind of president that Lee Kuan Yew was for Singapore, that Mahathir Mohamad was as Prime Minister of Malaysia, a transformational leader. We have not had that since 1999. I will be, if elected by Nigerians, I will be the first transformational leader that this country will have.
Okay, so let's go into your transformation agenda.
Yes.
Let's talk about the economy.
It's not Jonathan's PDP transformation agenda. Don't confuse things.
Your transformational strategy.
My transformational vision and strategy. Yes.
Okay, good. Now, the CBN has been defending.
I don't do agendas, by the way. I do visions, I do strategy. Agenda is a small matter.
Let's discuss your strategy now. Good. Now, the CBN has been defending the Naira tirelessly.
Absolutely.
Saying people should not even try to play around with it.
Yes.
they are going to use the foreign reserves to defend it extensively.
Yes.
Is this the right strategy?
No.
What would you do differently? Yeah. Why no? How dangerous is it for Nigerians?
It is dangerous. In fact, let me tell you why. It's like Sisyphus. If you read Greek mythology, you would know of a man called Sisyphus who was condemned by the gods to labors that were unrequited and unrewarded. That labor was to carry the world on his shoulder and keep, trying to push it back up, but he couldn't, and he kept sleeping. And so this is like the labors of, Sisyphus. So now, the problem with economic management in Nigeria is that it's not focused on fundamentals. The fundamental absence of economic philosophy in Nigerian economic management is why Nigeria's economy has not progressed. After 58 years of independence, all we have achieved is to become the poverty capital of the world, with unemployment of 19% and youth unemployment of over 50%, a rising population, rising unemployment, and rising poverty. The solution, the answer is philosophical. Are we a capitalist economy? Yes. If we are a capitalist economy, what makes capitalist economies successful? Nobody has answered that question in Nigerian economic management. I have the answers.
Sure.
The answers are that there are 3 things you must have in an economy that is a capitalist economy for it to function well. The first is property rights. You don't have full property rights in Nigeria when the government owns the land. And all you can get is a certificate of occupancy, CFO, for 99 years.
Really? You don't. After 99 years.
Yeah, but still 99 years. But you don't have full property rights when intellectual property is not. There are no incentives for people to be creative, and their creativity is protected, so that the financial reward to them for their creativity is high. That way, you find a lot of people pushing their talents towards innovation and creative thinking. We don't have that. Number 3, we don't have capital. You can't have capitalism without capital. And I was just talking about it, why the 1 trillion naira venture capital fund is so necessary. Because you need equity capital to come into the Nigerian economic system. All you have is credit, and the conditions for the granting of credit are not very favorable. So you find that access to finance for small businesses and small traders is very limited. So you need a venture capital fund that invests in startups that are risky as its business model. That's what we need. Now, that's one side of it. The second side of it is this. There are different types of capitalism. We are not sure which one we are. You have crony capitalism, which is what you have in South Korea and what you have in Nigeria and Russia. You have it in Nigeria and Russia in a bit of a negative way. In South Korea, it has been very productive for them because all the chaebols, the Samsungs and the Daewoo's and all those companies are owned by families. So wealth tends to be concentrated in the hands of a few conglomerates. But because the system is structured in such a way that most other companies are supply chain, part of the supply chain for these big conglomerates, the economy does well overall. You have entrepreneurial capitalism, which we also have in Nigeria, but in the United States. Then you have state capitalism, which you have in China. And then you have welfare capitalism, which you have in Europe. What is best suited for Nigeria? I recommend entrepreneurial capitalism because that goes with our culture. Nigerians are very dynamic, very entrepreneurial. They like to start businesses if you give them the opportunity. So why not structure the economic system? Instead of people looking for jobs that are not there, why not structure the economic system to be able to finance people who want to start businesses? Risky small ventures. That's why the 1 trillion naira venture capital fund is so necessary. I started by telling you that half of it will come from the government. The other half will come from private sector investors. Because we want, 500 billion. Immediately, I floated this idea for the first time about a year ago. I started getting messages in my social media from venture capital firms around the world. They said, we love this idea. We would love to come to Nigeria to invest in it if you become president. This is a year ago. The power of ideas. We don't We don't, because we're not thinking in Nigeria. We're not sitting down to think. We're just doing everything ad hoc, including managing our economy. You need to think very deeply before you can manage an economy successfully.
Okay. Now, you were reportedly recommended for dismissal and prosecution by the FRCN, a report that suggested Sanusi's suspension in 2014. You have denied these allegations continually. What really happened? Would like to know. What really happened? Will this, guilty or not, will this affect, do you think it will affect your race? You're running for office of president.
Please, who recommended me? If anybody recommended me, what did they say that I did?
Reportedly.
Reportedly. Good. This is just a fiction. Let me explain to you what happened.
Okay.
Somebody who was heading the FRCN then, I think his name was Obazi, something Obazi. Jonathan asked him,
the president,
the former president, President Jonathan, asked him to take a look at the central bank's accounts and make some recommendations, because the approval of the accounts of the central bank is one of the few, about 3 roles that the president has direct authority over in the central bank. Everything else in the bank is independent. It's not run by the government, or it's not supposed to, but let's not go there in terms of what has happened in the recent past. Now, so this gentleman, for some reason, even before he had conducted his investigation, reportedly now wrote a report saying that the governor and the deputy governors should be fired. Because of that, he had already prejudiced himself. He had not done his investigation, but he was already reaching a conclusion. Do you see the problem?
Yes.
So in law, it was injustice to the governor and to the deputy governors. So when later on, he actually began an investigation, it was easy for the governor at the time, Sanusi, to go to court and just quash the whole thing. Because the court said, you cannot prejudge the case. That's very unfair to the institution. So there was no basis on which he should have written such a report. So it's just one of those things. And it was, I think, maybe leaked or something like that. So, but the fact that he had that private opinion and communicated it to his principal, maybe he too wanted to be the governor. Maybe he wanted to be a deputy governor. So he wanted to clear space for himself. You know, so please, that's just one of the biggest jokes of the century.
Okay.
Yeah, I served, for the record, I served with distinction as deputy governor of the central bank. 5 years, nothing has ever been attached to me in terms of misdeeds, wrongdoing. I served creditably. I led reforms that stabilized the Nigerian financial system.
So this means that in every sense of the word, you consider yourself absolutely transparent.
Absolutely.
How much did you earn per month
as a deputy governor of the central bank?
Yes.
I think my earning was about 1.8. My salary was about 1.8 million naira a month. And that was even later on. Wow. It didn't start with that. It was lower than that.
1.8 million naira per month.
Per month, yeah.
Your take home?
That was, yeah.
Wow.
Wow. Is that big or small?
How much?
Let me tell you.
In response to
let me tell you the basis of that salary. There is a white paper that was done and approved by the government, that all the regulatory agencies must benchmark their salaries to, for the head of the regulatory agency, 50% of the MD of a private company in that industry, the average pay. And for example, for the governor, his take-home pay would be like about 50% of that of an MD of a bank. For the deputy governor, his take-home pay would be like about 50% of an executive director of a bank. The reason for this was to prevent regulatory capture. There was a lot of corruption in the banking.
No, what does that mean? Regulatory capture?
Where industry operators tempt regulators, knowing that they are very poor with financial gifts. It places a regulator in a situation where he could be tempted to play funny games because he or she is financially challenged. Do you understand what I'm saying? And he has responsibility and authority over industry operators who are so much better paid than him.
Now, bearing this in mind, and bearing in mind that almost every civil servant along the food chain, almost from all the way from level 1 all the way to the top, is financially challenged, is also tempted to us and exposed to people who meet with regulators.
Yes.
How much do you believe?
Not every civil servant has a regulatory responsibility.
How much?
Let's be very honest.
Okay, let's be honest with that. Okay. Now, how much do you believe a level 1 civil servant should earn, deserves to earn?
Now, we've had arguments about the minimum wage. I believe that the civil service should be very well rewarded. I am a proponent of that view. In Singapore, they're one of the best paid workers, civil servants. One of the reasons for this is that they take in only the best and the brightest in the civil service. In the Indian administrative service, it is the same thing. They take in only the best. We want to look at the civil service when I become president, to say, look, what should the civil service be, if not the engine to deliver the vision of a government through public service delivery? They should be well and decently paid. However, I also believe that you can never have a public sector that earns as much as the private sector, because the public sector is not a profit-making body. Do you understand? That is why we could not. The central bank has much more money than many banks, but we cannot earn more than half of the salary of those employees, because we are a public service. So if you want to make a lot of money, then you go into the private sector. That's where you go and make money. You cannot come to government to come and make money. But you should be decently remunerated so that your life is basically taken care of. And I do believe that. The minimum wage, I have said, it should not be anything less than 30,000 naira that labor is asking for. But it should not be more than 40,000.
Why?
Something in between. Let me tell you why. There are two principles that must be factored into looking at the minimum wage. Number one, ability to pay. If you have a minimum wage, is the government able to sustain that minimum wage? Can it be paid going forward? That's number one.
But if
ability to pay. Let me finish.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. The second principle is that you want to be very sure that if you are putting up a minimum wage, that it does not create inflationary impact if there's too much money in the hands of a lot of people chasing after too few goods. So what you do is to find the balance. I believe that between 30,000 to 40,000 naira, I would actually say the upper side of it, about 40,000, should give that balance. If you go above that, you risk creating massive inflationary pressures. But the government that is arguing that it cannot pay 30,000 naira, to me, that is a joke. The reason it's a joke is because if you know how much the politicians have available to themselves in security votes, if you know how much money is wasted in governance, if you know how much money is paid monthly by state governors to godfathers, and they claim they cannot pay a minimum wage of 30,000 naira, you hear the smell.
We're going to break now. When we come back, we'll continue. It's Bounce 60 minutes. Stay with us.
Hello everyone, this is Bam Bam.
And Teddy.
Download Bounce News app. Your news,
your edge.